Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for God is good, for God's steadfast love endures forever. Some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way to an inhabited town. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them. They cried to the Lord in their trouble, and God delivered them from their distress.
Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord, in my distress.
Some sat in darkness and in gloom, prisoners in misery and in irons, for they had rebelled against the words of God and spurned the counsel of the Most High. Their hearts were bowed down with hard labor. They fell down with no one to help. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and God saved them from their distress.
Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord, in my distress.
Some were sick through their sinful ways, and because of their iniquities endured affliction. They loathed any kind of food, and they drew near to the gates of death. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and God saved them from their distress.
Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord, in my distress. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord, in my distress.
Some went down to the sea in ships, doing business on the mighty waters. They saw the deeds of the Lord, wondrous works in the deep. For God commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted up the waves of the sea. They mounted up to heaven, they went down to the depths. Their courage melted away in their calamity. They reeled and staggered like drunkards, and were at their wits' end. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and God brought them out from their distress.
Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord, in my distress. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord, in my distress.
Let those who are wise give heed to these things, and consider the steadfast love of the Lord. Let them thank the Lord for this steadfast love, for God's wonderful works to humankind.
Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord, in my distress. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be
God's steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed say so. Judy Myers-Walls wrote this week in her Lenten word reflection that it seems that distress has been either creeping up behind or surrounding us on every side for more than a year now. In her field, they define distress as a condition in which the demands on us are greater than the resources that we feel we have at our disposal. Distress, a condition in which the demands on us are greater than the resources that we feel are at our disposal. During a period of personal distress, I found that I longed for distraction, yet couldn't watch any TV shows which had too much calculated tension. Even Call the Midwife could do me in. So I watched dog rescue videos on YouTube. Have you seen those? The scenario is nearly the same every time. A dog has been abandoned or dropped off somewhere, generally located in an unused lot or abandoned warehouse or junkyard or alley. No one can come close. There are lots of video images of self-protective growls and hackles that are raised. It is the very image of distress. And in comes the professional rescuers who know how to be with a dog in distress. They are mostly just present for a long time with gentle communication. You can see the wariness in the dog's eyes, often sideways. And I wonder if dogs can sense intention as they figure out if this human can be trusted. The process is to convince the dog to trust. Sometimes that convincing takes months, sometimes just a bit of time on an afternoon. Snacks are usually involved, and then in a moment of connection and action, a loop is placed around the distressed animal. With bare or heavily gloved hands, the rescuers hold the dog, pulling it in close, sometimes with the dog still fighting. The dog has likely grown accustomed to its state of distress so that its baseline of okayness is a pretty chaotic place. And there is always that moment when you see the dog shift. Something has disrupted its assumptions, its fear, its experience. The food, the gentle voice, the non-aggressive hands, the fearlessness that sends waves of confident comfort from the human animal to the dog animal. Something disrupts the need to self-protect, and the dog licks the hands that hold it. I wonder what trust tastes like. The videos are often chopped together so there is much we don't see, but generally by the time the dog has been taken to the vet and a bath is given and gnarly matted fur is cut away, a new dog appears, which is actually the same dog but freed from layers of neglect. We begin to see a tail wag and a different look in their eye. The videos are short and the outcome predictable and hopeful, and in my own distress, I would often look for that hopeful moment. Distress comes to us and it overtakes us. Are you currently in distress? What is your baseline of okayness? On a scale of 1 to 10, is your baseline 2 or 6? What type of distress are you living with? Pandemic stress, job insecurity, relational disappointment, vocational numbness? What is it for you? What elevates stress into the acute moment of distress and the feeling that it is greater than your available resources? Our psalm today, Psalm 107, brings us a curious mix of scenarios of distress. There are those who are lost and cannot find inhabited towns. There are those who sit in their own misery, like in iron chains of their own doing. There are those so sick from their own sinful life choices. There are those who took to the sea and discovered the power and danger and amazingness of water and wind and God. And there are those who experienced the flip from lush springs into thirsty ground, and the opposite flip from deserts into pools of water. In each vignette, no matter if one is at the mercy of life gone awry, or the maker of their own trouble, or the recipient of wild nature, they reach a point where they have no resource, no recourse, but to cry out for help. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord. Be with me, O Lord, in my distress. Anne Lamott, in her book, Help, Thanks, Wow, writes this: I have a brilliant friend who experiences God as a low-seated easy chair whose arms are very long and upholstered and actually hold her. I know a person with a PhD who goes to a church based on Star Wars. May the Force be with you. But you know what? When he and my other friends and I have run out of good ideas on how to fix the unfixable, when we finally stop trying to heal our own sick, stressed minds with our own sick, stressed minds, when we are truly at the end of our rope and just done, we say the same prayer. We say, help. We say, help, this is really all too much, or I'm going slowly crazy, or I can't do this, or I can't stop doing this, or I can't feel anything, or I have no life, or I hate the one I've created, or I forgot to have a life. I forgot to pay attention as it scrolled by. During my days of distress, in the midst of the swirling chaos inside, my head was trying to make sense of something that was not making sense, and I could not get my emotional ducks to line up. And I finally did the only thing I could, like extracting a length of yarn from a tangled skein. I remembered the cover of the Anne Lamott book, and I simply said, help me, God. Help me, God. Help me, God. My brain was tricked by my education and love for many words into believing I needed to offer God fully constructed sentences and paragraphs and arguments of worthiness, or the divine would not know what I was asking for, wouldn't know what I needed. These 3 words, help me, God, were like bubbles bubbling up out of the thickness of distress and chaos. And then they moved to just 2 words, help me. There is undeniable vulnerability in the speaking of just those 2 words. And then in the sorrow and exhaustion, only one bubbled up word was needed, help. The last stop, no longer believing I had anything to offer the process of distress than to utter this one word of helplessness. And I could say this one word, which was a full sentence in and of itself, a breath word that moves through the body holding grief, a word that contained the whole universe of meaning. And I then felt like the Holy Rescuer had wrapped a loving loop around my being so that I wouldn't be tempted back into the chaos. The Holy Rescuer brought calm, brought comfort, brought snacks, if you will, in the form of a mighty presence. One word to quell the distress, help. One word to find an inhabited place, help. One word to lead us out of our misery, help. One word to feed us the good broth of love, help. One word to right our ships from the tempests of life, one word to flip chaos into quiet, help. What help do you need to speak? What is your distress? Distress is not confined to the human experience. Our striving to create, exploit, and make without thought to the impact on the earth has put this good earth, the holy Eden, in a bundle of distress. And we are sitting in the denial of the distress of our own chains, in our own sin sickness of consumption as people. The Women's Bible and Book Study just finished reading the powerfully poignant and poetic book by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass. The author is a PhD botanist and a Potawatomi tribe member, braiding together Western science and indigenous earth wisdom. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, she writes of the impact of heavy industry on the Onondaga Lake in upstate New York. The lake is in distress. The earth is in distress. The moss, the frogs, the turtles are in distress. The water, which simply wants to do what it was created to do, is in distress and has been made an unwitting partner in the degradation. She writes what is hard to hear, knowing we cannot point the finger at the multinational corporations without owning our own cultural need for things, the things they make, as the earth and water are degraded. I am guilty. She writes of leachate that has replaced the lake water, sludge, waste beds, chalky depths. She says the water has been tricked. Help. Help. Onondaga Lake says, help. Must we reach that distress point of no resource before we make that shift change for the environment? I don't think so. I'm a hopeful sort. Even in distressing times of the realities of our environment, even as I recall my own moments of distress, even as I witness and hear the stories of distress during this pandemic. This week, a friend related something he witnessed. Parked at a gas station while on the phone, a van pulled up beside him. The man and woman inside were in the midst of a mighty argument. As I listened to this tale, I imagined a scene of disheveled woe. The woman got out and was crying near the door of the convenience store, processing her part of the fight, making a phone call. The man was working to get the van parked, taking out his frustration by erratic parking behavior while managing the open van door that the woman had left swinging. The woman was now inside the store. My friend, as he told the story, finished up his phone call, ready to jump in and call the police if the dispute escalated. He went inside to get what he needed, and he saw the woman in the aisle. He asked if she was okay. He said, "The gentleman you came with is still out there, and I don't know if he is supposed to be." My friend didn't offer help, but offered presence and gentle communication. And she told him a story of distress, of no money, of insecure living, of great stress and need. In the telling, she calmed down, let him know that she had called her mom and help was on the way. He made sure she was safe, and she responded that they both just needed 5 minutes away from each other to calm down, and then they could handle what needed handling. People are in distress all around us. Distress as workers of minimum wage jobs that make them vulnerable in this pandemic. If they do not work, they do not get paid. If they do not get paid, they cannot pay their rent. Distress as isolation and quarantine has exacerbated tenuous relationships to the point of breaking. Distress as humans who need good, kind human touch are unable to receive and give it. Distress as hope gives way to hopelessness, turning back to hope as vaccines are slowly rolled out, but not to everyone just yet. Distress when restaurant servers are cut from their jobs because of limited seating and customers. Distress by being the one who has to enforce the public mask regs for a population that doesn't want to be told what to do. Distress at end of life when family can only come into the room one or two at a time, and when holding hands is a clandestine activity. And what of the persons who surely must be in distress from their self-made misery, so lost in their sickness of the sin of hate? Who will hear their cry for help and help them, even them, lean into the steadfast delivering love of God? Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for the Lord is good, for God's steadfast love endures forever. If you are in distress and know not what to do, pray the one-word prayer: help. The psalm says that God delivered them all of them, from their distress. It doesn't say how. Help will come. For me, it was in breath prayers and the phone number of my sister who wanted every text of my distress. For others, it is in the quiet presence of a stranger who notices the distress of the other. We, the Manchester Church, are a faith community, and our basic faith beliefs are grounded in the radical hospitality of the gospel. And that doesn't just mean, welcome, come on in. It also means, here, let me sit with you. Here is my number. Text me day or night. Here, I brought soup. Here, I am with you. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for the Lord is good, for God's steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. And when we, who may not be in distress, see the feral dog look in the eyes of another, that sideways glance that shows distrust, the body language of agitation, the tears, the frozen moment of feeling that there are no resources, it becomes our turn to embody holy delivery of another out of their distress. Not to rescue, not to fix, unless it actually is in our power, but to see, to believe, to be present. In doing so, the one in distress begins to breathe again. And in the breathing comes a slow arrival of clarity. And in the clarity comes the possibility that there just might be a resource. The sacred is steadfastly present for those in distress. In upstate New York, the Onondaga people are committed to Gayan Ashagoa, the great law of peace, as they work as stewards of the land and water toward restoration, a voice for the voiceless lake. In our families and towns and places we shop, we might be the extension of God's steadfast love, the distressless for the distressed, an open door for delivery. We can do this because likely someone did it for us. We can do this because we know that the sacred is always present. always present, steadfastly present and creating a way of delivery that may still be unbeknownst to the one who suffers. If your eyes are not full of wild chaos, if your heart does not beat rapidly with fear, if your situation is predictable enough to offer some of your resource to another, then we must meet one another in the moment. Help. If your distress has you holding your breath, we can help you speak that one word. Help. When that help comes, the disheveled woe is met by the steadfast love of God, and then we together will speak our thanks. Pause with me for a moment of silence and reflection.